Greetings. In this video, I'm going to be looking at US presidential general election campaigns. That's quite a long sentence. We're looking at the general election, in particular, looking at the role of TV debates and some of the other things that might impact the outcome. But the first thing I need to point out is that this isn't necessarily on the specification. Now, I say necessarily because if we have a little look at it, you can see here it says electoral systems in the USA, presidential elections and their significance, and then it goes into detail about what that means. Now, the general election campaign is not on there. Campaign finance is, as you can see in 5.1.2, but it doesn't actually, as far as I can see, mention the TV debate and the general election campaign, but it does say presidential elections. And the other thing is when you look at any of the textbooks, they do give a bit of time to the general election campaign, and one of the textbooks in particular gives a huge amount of time to TV debates. So it would appear to me that you cannot be asked a question directly on this, but it may be something you wish to refer to. So my suggestion to my current students is that they watch this video, but then perhaps don't do any more with it other than a couple of notes and maybe a little bit of awareness about it. But that you shouldn't be asked a question directly on this topic. So the general election is when you go past the primary process and you move from going from interparty to intra-party, i.e. you go from a party fighting against itself, as in what's going on right now within the Democrat Party, the primary process, and perhaps in the Labour Party right now where they're trying to elect a leader, and you move to a system where now it's the Democrats versus the Republicans, or Labour versus the Conservatives, so going from inside your party into one versus the other. And that's where, of course, campaign finance becomes so important, firstly in the primary process and then in the general election campaign as well. And in my previous video, I talked through these slides here where I talked about how campaign funding has changed and gave various examples about how you can use it, but I don't intend to do that again because I've already done that in the previous video. But when the general election campaign actually starts, one of the most well-known parts of that is the TV debates. And TV debates have been part of American general election campaigns for years and years and years and years. It's still relatively new in the UK. As you're probably aware, they only started in 2010, and then Theresa May famously didn't do one in 2017, and then they were back in 2019. So it's yet to be seen whether they become kind of entrenched or a convention in the UK, but they are definitely there in the US. I'll link a video in the description of the YouTube video here from time.com, where they show some memorable moments from famous presidential debates. But essentially every general election has had them. So think of a particular pairing in a general election, they will have gone on a stage and debated together probably 3 times, but that again is a convention that has come along over time. Now, one of the things about questions over TV debates is, do they actually make a difference? Yes, they're a spectacle. Yes, the viewings are massive, as in the viewing figures. Yes, many people talk about them. Do they actually make a difference? The general accepted wisdom is probably not, because you can actually look at quite a few examples where one person seems to win the TV debates but still lose the general election. And the clear example here would be Hillary and Trump. It was widely kind of understood that Hillary won those debates. She was more on her game. She knew her facts better. She didn't make mistakes. She didn't come across as brash or angry, etc., etc. Like, she came across as the better performer. But as we know, she lost to Trump due to the electoral college system. But one election where we can probably say it did make a difference was all the way back in 1980, which is a special year for me because that's the year I was born, where Ronald Reagan took on Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was the incumbent. This is also one of the few examples of an incumbent losing a presidential election. And you'll also know from a previous video that the power of incumbency is strong. So this is rare for an incumbent to lose. And there was a kind of a famous kind of moment, or a kind of a moment that resonated with the public, which is where Ronald Reagan, who was the challenger at this point, kind of said to the TV camera the sentences that you can see on the screen behind me. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Is it easier to buy things than it was 4 years ago? Is America as respected in the world as it was? Are we as strong as we were 4 years ago? And these words resonated and they hit a chord and they were kind of discussed and publicized, and it was kind of felt felt that this was like a kind of a moment in American consciousness where America kind of went, well, no, we are no longer as well off as we were. And you can see here in the pink box behind me, support fell away badly from Carter. He only won 6 states, but maybe this debate is the exception for making a big difference. If you've seen the website 270towin.com, if you go back to 1980, the presidential result, you can see Reagan basically wiped the floor with him. But of course, we don't know what the difference would have been if there hadn't have been a TV debate. He might well have won anyway, but it's generally accepted that this was a bit of a moment. So let's talk about a little bit about the history of presidential debates. They were first used in 1960. They nearly always have 2 debates behind podiums with questions from moderators. So the candidates kind of are right there behind that podium. You've got a moderator in front of them asking them kind of questions. They're often on a variety of TV channels. So one debate might be on one channel, and then the second debate might be on another channel. But then they often have one town hall style debate as well, which is where you have an audience and the audience are able to kind of ask questions. Think kind of BBC Question Time, that kind of style of debate. It's normally only been between the top 2, i.e. the Democrat and the Republican, but in 1992, a third-party candidate was allowed, which was Ross Perot. But the question is, do they actually matter? It was generally accepted, as I've said previously, that Clinton beat Trump in her debates, but she lost. But also it was generally accepted that Romney beat Obama in their debates, which is surprising because as Obama is known as a good and proficient orator. But it was generally accepted he had an off night or didn't prepare particularly well. But of course, Romney did lose to Obama in 2012. Style is often more important than substance, perhaps a bit of a sign of the times, but how you say it and how you look while you say it is often more important than what you actually say. A man called Al Gore, who lost to George Bush in 2000, was audibly sighing throughout the debate, kind of like, and making kind of various noises. And of course, the microphone picked all these up, and it was kind of felt that he kind of was kind of not really engaging very well, was quite grumpy. George Bush, who is the first one, the Bush 41, at one point was asked a question during the town hall debate, and he looked at his watch, which is only a tiny little movement, but it was kind of felt, well, I'm sorry, do you not have enough time to answer questions from the public? Have you got somewhere to be? Probably a completely involuntary reaction by himself, just looking at the time. But it was a moment, and again, the style was kind of quite important. Tricky Dicky, Richard Nixon, in the very first TV debates, was incredibly sweaty under the stage lights. He got incredibly kind of damp and wet up here, and it made him look very shifty, very kind of suspicious, as if he had something to hide. Of course, he covered himself in makeup for the next debate, but how you look is important in these debates. Big mistakes can be costly. Rick Perry in 2016 in one of the early primaries famously forgot one of his own major policies. I think I've mentioned in a previous video, he was talking about abolishing 3 departments, and he said the 3 departments I want to abolish are, and he couldn't remember what they were. So mistakes like that can be costly. And good soundbites can be memorable. Reagan's "Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?" Maybe Trump's "Make America Great Again." But of course, a lot of those slogans don't necessarily come from the TV debates. They perhaps come from a general kind of campaign. Now, incumbents don't always like debates. Theresa May, David Cameron always kind of avoided them because it sometimes felt that actually the incumbent has everything to lose and the challenger has everything to gain, because the president is always well known. Whether you like Donald Trump or don't like Donald Trump, everyone knows Donald Trump, but not everyone will know whoever the new Democrat challenger will be. And the TV debates will always give publicity to that challenger, even if that challenger does kind of badly. And so incumbents tend to be less in favor of them. Plus, they have less time to prepare because they are the president as well as trying to campaign. So they tend to be less popular for that kind of particular group. But TV debates, of course, are not the only factors in general election campaigns. Events, dear boy, events. The October surprise. There always seems to be something that happens in October that throws the elections off, whether that's Clinton's emails, whether that's Trump's. I've written Trump's cat problem, but he liked to say that he grabbed women by the cat problem, and there was a hurricane and various scandals kind of came out. There seems to be something about American politics. You have a general election in November, but something always seems to happen in October that kind of throws things up a little bit. Events, dear boy, events actually came from a British politician. He was asked what the most difficult thing about being Prime Minister was, and he said, events, dear boy. The other factor, of course, the incumbent advantage. 22 out of the last 31 incumbent presidents have won re-election, and the only three losers in the last 40 years have been during bad points in the US economy, whether that was Jimmy Carter in 1980, George Bush in 1992. So you could argue that actually the economy is a far bigger factor than any of the others, and of course maybe policies are more important than how they perform in the presidential debate, TV debates as well. And maybe time for a change is a big factor too. Only twice has a president who completes 2 full terms been followed by another member of the same party, i.e., say you have presidents can only serve 2 terms, so you often kind of go Democrat, Democrat, Republican, Republican, Democrat, Democrat, Republican, Republican. Now, only twice has a Democrat, Democrat, say Obama, been followed by another Democrat, or 2 Republicans, say Reagan, Reagan, been followed by another Republican. So it may well be that the biggest factor is how long a particular party has been in power. Putting all these things in mind, I've said this before, looking at the maths of it, or the history of it, Trump's probably going to win because he is the incumbent, and it isn't yet time for a change. History would also suggest that whoever stands as the Republican candidate after him will lose. However, if you're watching this in a year's time and Trump lost, then I'm completely wrong. But the odds are on his victory at this stage. And then we move on to the Electoral College, which I will be covering in lessons and will probably make a video on at certain points. But that is all we're going to cover on the general election campaign. So it gives you a bunch of things to talk about, other issues that you can discuss, and I hope you found this interesting. Let me know if you've got any questions, and I'll see you soon. Bye.